Hello, everybody, and welcome to the final iIIRG in Conversation webinar of 2025. This is a production of the International Investigative Interviewing Research Group. My name is Christopher Kelly, and along with Susanna Flolo, we are the co-directors of iIIRG and are very excited that you are here with us today to hear our esteemed panelists discuss the critical issue of recording interviews. In this special webinar, we are highlighting our long-standing strategic partnership with Davidhorn, Europe's leading provider of evidential interview solutions for over 40 years. Many of you are surely familiar with Davidhorn's technologies, but suffice it to say, they work to ensure the integrity and accountability of investigations, strengthen justice systems, and uphold civil rights. And Davidhorn is dedicated to contributing to fair and transparent legal proceedings. For more information, please visit davidhorn.com. Before introducing our panelists, allow me to make a few announcements. If this is your first iIIRG event, welcome and thank you for being here. iIIRG is the world's largest network of practitioners, researchers, and professionals driving effective and ethical information gathering from individuals who may possess critical information. We unite to advance evidence-based approaches that inform and enhance justice and security while maintaining the highest ethical standards in investigative interviewing. In addition to these quarterly webinars, we hold biennial in-person conferences, the next of which is happening next July in Leuven, Belgium. And that's coming up fast, so please save the dates of the week of 6 July in your diaries and calendars. Also, iIIRG has a peer-reviewed journal, Investigative Interviewing Research and Practice, and we recently published the first bilingual edition of the journal, where full articles are published in English, but extended summaries are in Spanish. I'd also like to welcome Dr. Cody Porter as the new editor-in-chief of the journal. Finally, if you are not a member of iIIRG, we hope that you consider joining us to support events such as this webinar, plus gaining access to the largest network of investigative interviewing professionals and receiving discounts on future conferences and future access to materials such as these webinar recordings and networking grants. So as we begin, if you have any questions for our presenters, please place them in the Q&A box, and Susanna and I will be moderating a discussion after the presentations. I'd also like to thank those of you who sent in questions with your registration, and we have included a number of those in our upcoming conversation. So first, please welcome Dr. Dian Dia-an Muniroh, who is an associate professor in the Linguistic Study program at Indonesia University of Education. She earned her PhD in forensic linguistics from RMIT University in Australia in 2019. Since then, she has actively promoted forensic linguistics and delivered investigative interviewing training for academics and professionals across Southeast Asia. She is a member of the European Cooperation in Science and Technology, the COST action known as Establishing Networks to Implement the Principles on Effective Interviewing for Investigations, aka our friends at Implemendes. Next, please welcome Dr. Ivar Fahsing, who is a retired detective chief superintendent and associate professor at the Norwegian Police University College. He also serves as a visiting professor at the Norwegian Center for Human Rights, Faculty of Law at the University of Oslo. With over 15 years of operational experience as a senior detective in the Oslo Police Department and the National Criminal Investigation Service of Norway, Dr. Fahsing brings a rare and authoritative perspective to the study and practice of policing and criminal investigations. Dr. Fahsing is internationally recognized for his contributions to investigative interviewing, decision-making, investigative management, and knowledge transfer in complex criminal cases. He played a key role on the Advisory Council for the Principles on Effective Interviewing, otherwise known as the Mendes Principles, and was lead editor of the newly validated United Nations Manual on Investigative Interviewing. Finally, please welcome Stig Knudsen, who is the Chief Partner Officer at Davidhorn and a Level 3 Investigative Interviewing, who is here to share his expertise on technology and strategy to our conversation on recording technology. With extensive experience in developing and deploying recording systems across jurisdictions, Stig will discuss the role of innovation, standardization, and cross-sector collaboration in supporting ethical interviewing practices. Thank you all for being here. And I'd like to start, as many of you know, Susanna and I work very hard every day to make sure iIIRG is a global organization and we reach as many jurisdictions and corners of the world as possible. And so with that, I'd like to start by learning a little bit more about interview recording in Indonesia. Dr. Muniroh, please tell us the state of electronic recordings of police interviews in your country, including the prevalence, any laws that speak to it, and the challenges that make this difficult to put into practice in Indonesia.
All right, thanks, Chris, for the very warm welcome. First of all, I would like to say thank you for inviting me to talk in this really prestigious webinar. And now let me begin by providing some context about Indonesia. So Indonesia is one of many countries in the world that follows a civil law system in its judicial process. And this means our judicial process focuses more on written laws and documents rather than oral arguments like in common law countries. And this system was inherited from the Dutch during the colonial period, and it still shapes how investigations are carried out today. And as a result, electronic recordings are not commonly used in the investigation process. Since the introduction of the investigative interviewing to the Indonesian police, and we can trace back to the 2013-2014 through good collaboration with our colleagues from the Norwegian Center for Human Rights. So police recording then becomes more like hot discussion. And during that period in 2014, 2015, I was pursuing my PhD at RMIT University, Australia, under the supervision of Professor Georgina Hayden. And it focused on the adaptation of the cognitive interviewing to the Indonesian policing context. And as we know, cognitive interviewing is one of the recommended methods within the peace framework, for obtaining reliable information from cooperative witnesses. And my research sought to explore one of these. So if cognitive interviewing were to be implemented within Indonesia's criminal justice system, what kind of legal environment would best support it? And would any existing laws or police regulations need to change to enable the cognitive interviewing strategies to function effectively in the Indonesian context? And so to answer these questions, I employ the Delphi method to gather expert knowledge and insights. And the Delphi method involved two rounds. The first round involved the interviews, and the second round is the closed questionnaires. There were a total of 28 experts involved. They are legal professionals, like police investigators, lawyers, judges, prosecutors. I also involve academics. They are psychologists, criminologists, policing studies expert, human rights activists, and also journalists. And the findings show that the participants have a very positive view of electronically recording interviews, which is a key part of the cognitive interviewing. But interestingly, this positive view does not really align with our current police regulations. And so the regulations mentions the use of recording devices, but they don't actually require it. So to really get the full benefits of the cognitive interviewing, Indonesia needs to strengthen its regulatory framework. And the police may also need to develop like clearer guidelines that encourage the use of open-ended questions and make recording every interview a standard practice. In fact, we already have a strong legal foundation that supports this idea of electronic recording. Our Criminal Procedure Code, Article 117, paragraph 2, clearly states a suspect's statement belongs to the suspect, not to the investigator's interpretation. So it says when the suspect provides a statement, the investigator shall record it accurately and precisely in accordance with what is declared by the suspect. So this really shows why electronic recording is so important. It helps ensure that every word is captured accurately and fairly. Yet, at the moment, our regulations still don't make recording mandatory. But good news, so there are some promising like pilot projects that are encouraging its use, especially in cases of women and children. And in fact, several like specialized units, particularly those handling women and child protection, have already interviewing rooms equipped with cameras and recording systems. And now I would like to show you a short video, yeah, from one of these pilot projects. It's a special interview room with excellent facilities at the Wonosobo Police Office in Central Java, Indonesia. And to have this room, I think it's almost a decade, yeah, since the first investigative interviewing training in Indonesia. All right, so let's have a look at this video. Yeah, so in this video, we can see that the Wonosobo Police Office welcoming, Professor Raibul, together with Knut Asklund from the Norwegian Center for Human Rights, and also Kjell Erik, yeah, from the Norwegian Police University College. They visited the special interview room, as you can see here. This very great unit of recordings. This room has excellent facilities and meet international standards for ethical and effective interviewing. Yeah, and the recording unit was handed over, yeah, by Knut and Eric free of charge for us, yeah, from the Norwegian Center for Human Rights, okay, to the Wonosobo Police Office. All right, so in practice, because we still rely on the written investigation reports, recording are mostly used as a double check. Just in case some information is missed or not captured accurately when the report is being typed. Yeah, so the recording itself or even its transcript doesn't go to court. But recently there have been also some encouraging developments within the Corruption Commission of the Indonesian National Police. They've begun experimenting with electronic recording during the preliminary investigation stage using like AI assisted tools to help generate interview summaries. Yeah, however, the main challenges are quite practical. There are still limitations in an infrastructure. We have very large, widespread island, many police offices, so that will become problems in uneven levels of technological readiness across regions and uncertainty about how these recordings fit into the existing legal procedures. But many investigators continue to regard the written report as only the official record, which makes the transition to the digital recording a gradual, slow process. Okay, that's I can share about this point, Chris.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Dian. And we'll come back, but let's broaden the conversation a little bit. We received a question from April, who's a practitioner from the UK, who wants to know, Ivar, I'm going to throw this to you. April wants to know, what are the systemic, cultural, or logistical barriers that prevent universal adoption of recording, and what you tell police leaders to convince them that this is such a critically important practice? Ivar?
Well, thanks, Chris, and thanks, Dian, and thanks everybody for having me today. I just have to correct you, Chris. I'm no longer a police officer.
I read your bio you gave me.
I'm so sorry. I must have just sent you an old one. It's not that long ago, though. I retired from the Norwegian Police September 1st. And
Congratulations.
it gives me even more opportunity to work with Susanna and my great colleagues at the Norwegian Center for Human Rights. So Thanks a lot. It's probably my mistake there. Back to your question, Chris. Well, what stops them from doing this, or stops them for beginning? I guess probably is that it's probably linked to typical police omnicompetence and overconfidence cultures. to be fair, police officers around the world meets a high number of very challenging tasks, and you can't really sink too deep as a generalist in any of these. I guess that's a systemic problem with policing all over. That what we really need are specialists, but what we can afford are generalists in most areas. So that is the base culture. So you have to kind of cope on a working level to keep your head above water. Secondly, I think it's mainly lack of insight and knowledge to areas like linguistics, like Diana and Georgina and are bringing to the table here. How do we actually understand each other, and are we going deeply into that? And also the psychological part. They don't have training or knowledge in actually understanding the limitations of human memory and the big limitations in human multitasking abilities. So they probably think they are good as they are. And secondly, I would also say, like Dian pointed out, is the lack of legislation. Maybe because as long as the police can go on as they do without recording and still win cases in courts, why should they change? So that's why I wholeheartedly support Dian's suggestion that if you really want to change this has to become hard law.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ivar. Stig, similar question to you. Your thoughts on the barriers to adoption and how to overcome them?
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for having me, first of all. And Dian, interesting to hear the current situation that you have there. I think, the barriers are, it's very different from territory to territory. We're talking about technology that needs to be adopted or taken into use. And in certain cases, there is hesitation about doing it because, you need to learn something else which you're not used to do. But so basically, it's a culture thing, I would say. And of course, in certain cases, there is budgets involved. You need to buy equipment and get equipment and set it up. So there are many different things that causes this. But I think, as Ivar said, you need to have this. It needs to come from the top. There needs to be a legislation in place to encourage to do it. Because if you tell someone you need to record your interview, basically it doesn't really help, because what are you going to do with that file? If no one tells you what you're going to do with that file, you have recorded an interview. And the problem is that you're giving a false impression for the interviewee that this is documented, because if you don't know what to do with it, it's basically not documented. It's just a file on a physical thing somewhere. There needs to be a workflow in place, and to be able to convince the users, you also need to tell them what they can do with the finished product. I mean, with the recording itself. And if you can't tell them anything else, then you need to record and nothing more. I think the hurdle is difficult. So that's why it's important to have like an ecosystem from beginning to end. So you basically can take advantage of it. And you need to remember that it is sensitive evidence. This is not the CCTV from a public place. This is something recorded in a room, two persons talking together. So it is sensitive. And that's very important to also communicate. And of course, all the benefits you have. by having a solid evidence, which is basically taking care of the interviewee, but it's also, documenting that the interviewer is doing a good job. So there is a lot of barriers that needs to, a lot of hurdles, but it needs to start on the top. There needs to be a process and a legislation in place, and there needs to be training so they know what to do and how to use it and understand the benefits of it.
Yeah, of course. Stig, quick follow-up. We have a question from David, who's a practitioner in the US, and he's wondering about private or corporate interviews. And if you have any experience, and you can talk about the similarities and differences between public sector and private sector interviews and recording and the challenges in the private sector.
Yeah, because then you're basically not talking about, I would say, evidence, but you're documenting something. And I think the most important thing then is clarity, accountability, protection for all parties involved, transparency. All of this is important. And I mean, there are different ways of doing recording in private companies. It could be HR. Then you need to document what has been said. And there can be, misunderstandings, but at least if you have it recorded, you have something to go back to and actually check if there has been any misunderstandings. But basically, if you record the interview, you have secured transparency and accountability. And I think that's the most important thing in any conversation, basically.
Great, thank you. Dian, back to you. And if we can talk about forensic linguistics a little bit more, your specialty. How does recording facilitate effective interviewing from the perspective of forensic linguistics?
Okay, thanks, Chris. So from a forensic linguistics point of view, recording really changes how we understand investigative interviewing. So it helps us see what actually happens in the room, not just what appears later in a written report. The recordings also provide like a valuable corpus for examining how language operates in institutional and evidential settings. So let me tell you one by one. So the first one, recording let us understand how people think and respond during the interview. So when we have the audio or the video, we can hear how the interviewer asks questions and how the interviewee answers. Their pauses, the tone, their hesitations. And Georgina Hayden in 2012 shows that this kind of analysis helps reveal whether a person is speaking freely or just agreeing with what the police suggest. Also, other experts like from Van Chandop in 2014 and Comter, I think 2019, also explained that a written plea, the results of the negotiation between the interviewer and the interviewee, and the version of the story that both agree will become the official record. So this is about negotiation. And earlier research also from like Johnson and Lionel, Francis Rock, Malcolm Coulthard also shows that when spoken talk is turned into written text, a lot of important interactional details disappear. Things, yeah, as I mentioned, like hesitation, tone, and how the interviewer's questions shape the story. Yeah, what ends up in the written report, because here in Indonesia, we really rely on that report, usually sounds smoother, more factual, and sometimes even more intentional than what was actually said. Another thing that is also important is that on the recordings also helps us create better and more reliable transcripts. So once we have the audio or the video, we can check every word, pause, and tone is represented accurately. enter projects like For the Record in the United Kingdom, led by Kate Howard, shows that improving transcription practices makes police records more consistent and fair. Even small features like how a post is written can shape how people later judge an interviewer's honesty or confidence. And the last one, I think recordings also help us adapt the interviewing techniques for different linguistic and cultural context. So because that's its corpus, then we use recordings to improve the communication strategies in multilingual police environments. Yeah, so this my study show this, yeah, with Georgina. So this helps make interviewer fairer for people from diverse backgrounds. Yeah, so as Stig mentioned, that the recording really helped for accuracy and accountability. And as the forensic linguist, we see that as data, and from that we can learn what happened during the interview.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Ivar, I have a similar question, though I'm going to include a few of our participant questions in this. So staying in this realm of how recording ensures the effectiveness of the interview. From Louise, who's an academic in the United Kingdom, when an interviewee knows that they're being recorded, how does that impact the effectiveness of the interview, especially with regard to determining whether they are truthful or deceptive? And if I may add a related question to this, Ivar, I know I'm violating all principles of good questioning here by asking multiple questions at once. But can recording, this is from Scott in Australia, can recording actually be a hindrance to gathering information in any way?
Thanks, Chris, and it's a really interesting question. So I have to say, when we introduced recording in Norway around 25 years ago, the officers clearly reported those kind of worries. But when we investigated that, we found out that this worry was probably more transferred from the officer to the interviewee, that the officers didn't feel competent enough to kind of start recording their own interviews. And in my view, this insecurity was transferred to the interviewee and then recorded back, said that there was no recording here because the interviewer was not comfortable with it. And so hence, actually the introduction of mandatory recording was what really kicked off the national Norwegian interviewing program. And we understood that, okay, we can't really expect the officers to do this without giving them a proper training and a confidence that is realistic and real before we really start recording. But so in my view, after having interviewed hundreds of suspects, especially in serious cases, I have never felt that there actually has been any kind of hindrance at all. But of course, I never introduce a recording as an option. I just tell them that this is how we do it, and I tell them why. Because, I cannot possibly be able to grasp every word you say. There is a high risk that something will get lost. There is a high risk of later that we will misunderstand each other. And I also inform them, like Steve said, about the process to reassure that this is tamper-proof. We use the Davidhorn systems where you have a QR code that automatically is displayed when the interview is over. That QR code is a special encryption of that particular file, the original file, that the interviewee or the solicitors can bring out of the interview and later bring to court if there is any questions surrounding what is the original. So these kind of things, and also handling worries. If they do have questions, is there a chance that this will be on the 9 o'clock news or things like that? You have to deal with that up front as a professional interviewer. But no, I don't think there. On the other hand, to be honest, Chris, we travel around the world, people like you and me and others in this webinar, and teach them science-based interviews that basically is trying to be as non-contaminating as possible. Typically, when you get to the really important questions, you have to try to approach them as an open-ended question as possible. And how can you capture that in a realistic way? How can you also facilitate a as open communication as possible without allowing the interviewee to kind of travel their journey, a messy journey into their language and memory? And if you try to record that, they will automatically see that you are writing, and then they, in my experience, will start adapting the story to become your kind of servant in that process, which is highly damaging and often happens unconsciously. So yeah, no hindrance, just a great help.
Yeah, Susanna, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, so we got a question in the chat, Ivar, which I think you can answer fairly quickly, I assume. How does the interviewer proceed in instances where the interviewee doesn't consent to the recording of the interview?
Oh,
What is
good
your
question.
experience there?
Good question. Of course, we never ask for consent. But because this either is recorded or there is no interview. So if you don't, it's almost like flying an airplane. If you don't put on the seatbelt, you won't be a passenger of this flight. I'm the captain, I'm the professional part. I know that's not safe. But we have had instances, as you probably know, Susanna, in the dramatic and tragic incident where a guy started to fire with a machine gun on the Pride celebration in Oslo 3 years ago. And he did not trust the recording process. He was afraid that they will manipulate it, and he said, I won't give you an interview on tape to the Oslo police. Then they called me and Dr. Asbjørn Raklev and asked for advice, and we said, well, you probably should not do the interview, but in that particular case, that was also the beginning of the Pride celebrations in Oslo. So we said there are other perspectives than the mere investigative ones. Is he part of a bigger campaign against the Pride, not only in Norway, but maybe throughout the world or in Europe? So maybe you could do what we call a security interview of him. That is primarily has a preventative function and not so much meant as evidence. And you can offer him that as a start-up interview, but then you have to accept that there is another transcriber in there who can verbatim write down what he says as it goes along. They gave him that offer, but he didn't really want to give an interview anyway. But it's not a problem. We don't see that happen very much in Norway. It's very, very rarely that people say that, I have to say.
This is one of those many instances when it comes to policing in the legal system that jurisdictions vary. And I mean, and I'm from a big country that has lots of different legal cultures and practices. And for example, the state I'm in Pennsylvania, it is what's known as a two-party consent. And for the police to interview, they have to at least notify the interviewee that they're being recorded. And I don't know actually what happens if the person says they don't want to be. I think they have to turn it off. And that's a good question though. But Stig, did you want to jump in here?
No, I mean, from the interview perspective like that, I don't have too much experience like Ivar has. So
Well, you can leave your unmuted for the moment because the next question is for you. You alluded to this a little earlier in your first remarks, but if you could tell us, once the interview is recorded, what should be done with it at that point? How is the integrity of the recording preserved in terms of safeguarding the evidence and the individuals involved in it? And so I think you can give us some good insight on that process and the importance of it.
Yeah, so you know, there are different ways of doing it, but basically, like we do it, we record locally. To make sure that there is no latency with recording if you're recording to a remote server or anything. So you're 100% sure that every time you press record, you will have a recording. But of course, so that, you know, there are four main things related to this. So you have the secure storage. You have like a automatic audit trail, so you can later see what has been done with it, who accessed this. You have the user permission, so you can limit who can access this recording. And you have the, as Eva mentioned, the digital signature or the hash of the recording. So this means secure storage. You record it, you have it encrypted. So let's say you use, it could be a mobile app, it could be a portable recorder in the field. If you lose it, you cannot access the recording. So even if they open the laptop, take out the hard drive, they wouldn't be able to see it. So that's one important thing. There you have problems, potentially, if you have memory cards or DVDs. So there have been multiple situations where police forces is actually losing a DVD with a statement or something like that. It's a big problem because it's sensitive information, and there are names, addresses, situation mentioned. So you need to avoid it. So by using an end-to-end solution, you will make sure that the recording is encrypted on the unit and then uploaded to a centralized archive, like a DEM solution, like our iIIRG solution. So you have it there, and you will have the audit trail, so you can see when it was, let's say, handed over from the unit to the server. That's important. So you maintain the chain of evidence. And you would also be able to see if someone has accessed it. Why have you played back this evidence 25 times? You know, all of that is important. And of course, you have the user permission to avoid people accessing it. And you have that on the server environment. And for the digital signature, as Eva said, you take the picture, you can write down the checksum, you can have it as, store it. And when you go to court, if it's played back, you can end up in a situation where someone says, this is not what I said. This interview has been tampered with. Then you can verify that this recording has not been tampered with. It's 100% authentic. So there are a lot of measures in place to kind of preserve integrity. And the problem we often see when there is, for instance, a tender from a national police force, it's very technical oriented. They say, we would like 4K cameras, we would like 5 cameras and 2 microphones. It needs to be a computer with this kind of CPU. But, you know, if you take it down, that's not important. The important thing is you're working with sensitive evidence, and that's the main measurements you need to take. And if you don't do it, it doesn't really help if you have 5 cameras in a room and millions of microphones. If you can't verify and if you can't make sure that you produce evidence, it really doesn't help.
Thanks, Steve. Susanna?
Sorry. Thank you so much, Stig. We seem to have triggered something in the Q&A, Eva, with the term consent for recording interviews. Do you want to elaborate a little bit about what you meant by that? So not as
I actually also answered in the chat there. Of course, all interviews you give to the police should be under consent. We never pressure people to say anything, and we, of course, highly promote that kind of voluntarily cooperative style, and if they anyway don't want to do that, is their full right. For witnesses, of course, we can take them to court if we find that interesting enough, because they are obliged to give a statement in Norway. But what I meant with consent is that we don't explicitly ask for consent as if there is an option that I am willing to do this interview without recording it, because we can't really recommend that. If you don't want that, there is no interview. That's what I meant. So, and I think it should be obvious to everyone how dangerous this is. Think about it. Let's say it's a crime scene detective. Can you just imagine that he comes back and he's just writing what he found? This is my story about what this crime scene looked about? Will we even consider to use that as evidence? I think not. So I think it's about time to understand how crucial this is. It's not something that is nice to have. It's absolutely fundamental, both to the evidential weight of the interview, but also to the communication in the interview.
Thanks, Ivar. Okay, we're gonna do a little round of rapid fire. And so this is for any of our panelists who would like to jump in. I have 3 or 4 of these. And so the first is Gil Zamora from the US asks about body-worn cameras. So up to this point, we've been talking exclusively about interview room solutions. But would anyone like to comment about this technology, including the utility of body-worn cameras and gathering reliable statements in the field?
I can.
Steve?
Yeah, I mean, body-worn cameras, they're recording. You have the audio, you have the video, is representing an evidence. You just need to make sure that you have the chain of evidence, that you have the authenticity, and that part of it, because that's the fundamental. If you use a mobile app, if you use a body-worn camera, you know, it's kind of the same as long as the fundamental is in place. What's also important, I mean, body-worn cameras can be used for 2 purposes. It can be used in a public place with a lot of people around, but you could also, you know, in a locked environment where there's only 2 people, for instance. So when is it sensitive and when is it public? And I think you see a lot of that on the TV, that when the police is running with the body cams, that's in a public area. But you seldom see a body-worn recording from an interview room or from a living room where only 2 people are talking together, because it's a totally different type of evidence, basically. So yes, it can be used if you have the proper measurements as a basis, meaning chain of evidence, hash, all of that, what is needed.
Yeah, okay. Dian, any thoughts? Did Indonesian police wear body-worn cameras?
I don't think so. Yeah.
That's well, that's good for everybody to know, and that's maybe a future direction, but one thing at a time. Ivar, any thoughts on this before we move on?
No, I will definitely agree with Stig that if this is the choice, any recording is better than no recording. Absolutely.
Good.
But of course, you have to, what I think is fundamental is that you should inform the interviewee that this is being recorded. That is, I think, definitely although in Norway, technically, legally, you actually don't have to inform if you record something if you're yourself a part of the conversation. But I think in a police situation like that, you definitely should inform about that. That's about trust. And so that's very important. And I think that is a critical thing for all of those interviews. So whatever means you use, but like Stig said, technology is getting more and more accessible today.
Sure.
And body-worn cameras is probably a really good solution. And as you just have to have a solution where you actually can capture these these sound or video files so that they can go into the bigger information flow in an investigation, and also capture the integrity that this hasn't been tampered with. Yeah.
Okay, so the next topic is about young or underage interviewees. And in the Q&A, David Glasgow notes that young people often feel acutely embarrassed to appear on video. And so David says that may interview with the young person just off camera. But Roli Sandra from the Netherlands would like to know if there are any other special considerations for recording youthful interviewees.
I could just add to that and say hi to Ruli. Thanks for the question, Ruli. I can just say that I'm not a specialized child or vulnerable interviewer in Norway, but I've dealt a lot with people who are. And first of all, you need to have better equipped interview rooms. Children very often behave differently than grown-ups in our interviews. So they move around. All of a sudden, when they feel comfortable to talk about what they possibly might have been subjected to, you might find them under the sofa. And so you need better technology, better cameras. You need better microphones that cover all of the room. And of course, you also need better interviewers, because children are probably, or any vulnerable, are harder to interview. So you probably have to document even better how this conversation was captured and how it was done in a safe and reliable way, and make it available to the decision makers in an even more stricter and better documented way.
Steve, go ahead.
And also what we see is that in many cases, in a room with grown-ups, if there's noises from a camera moving or something, it really doesn't matter that much. But if you have kids there, you need to make sure that you have quiet equipment, and it should be possible to move it around. So as Ivar said, they might be under the sofa, but somehow you need to capture that as well. And we must not forget that audio is the primary evidence. It doesn't really help have 10 cameras in a room if you have one microphone up in the ceiling. And with a solution where you can actually move the microphone around, place it closer to the child, might help. And of course, be able to control the cameras like a PT set solution, so that you can follow it, the child, when they move around the room. And we also have setups and solutions where basically the cameras are hidden. It's not to hide that we're recording, but it is to avoid distraction. So for children, it could be more interesting with a camera on the wall and what is really this. So you can hide it back panels and stuff.
Dian.
Yeah, thank you. So I would like to, hi, really, thanks for the question. I would like to extend a point that Ivar raised on the good interviewers. And so I think the great equipment that Stig has floored, as I agree, that's really important. Another thing that as good interviewers, that using like age-appropriate language and method is also important. Yeah, because when we talk to, underage interviewees, is different to when we talk to adult. So I think that is also important. Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
I think I have to add here, Gianna, that I think, especially when you see kids, but I think we need more research, similar to what Lawrence Allison and Emily and their team in Liverpool has actually been going into real interviews and breaking down what really works. Yeah. And I think if we did that, based on I'm not trying to predict science here, but based on my practical experience, I probably think we have to see what I at least hear from a lot of our top specialists on children interview in Norway, that you can't really start a topic with an open-ended question. And you can just try. If you have a kid in your vicinity, it might be your neighbor or your niece or your daughter or something, and they come back from kindergarten and ask them, what happened in kindergarten today? Tell me everything. They won't, there will be silence. So you have to engage in some kind of conversation where they feel that, okay, now I can play with this and start digging in. So very often that will be a leading or at least a closed question. And then from there, start going into a good question when it comes to what could be evidence. So I think that's another part of this where we probably should use recording to do even more research of the intricacy of language and how it really works. And sometimes even at least in my language, like let's say a close question saying like, how was your weekend, Dian?
Yeah.
Is in de facto can be seen as an open-ended question, but it's camouflaged to make it less intruding. So it is it's an invitation for you to tell me as much as you would like about the weekend, but I'm not kind of forcing you.
Right.
Yeah, I
Thank
agree.
you.
That's really important point. And just one point to add. There's also an interesting research, I think, from the Netherlands. I know Roel is in the Netherlands. There's a ground rules on the child interviewing. So that's how questions is to see whether the kids, the child can differentiate between providing the truthful answer or untruthful answer. Yeah, so there's kind of like profiling the language of the children and also the ground rules that the Netherlands police has. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Okay, everybody's favorite question of, I guess, contemporary days. Our friends Vladimir from Ukraine and Dennis from Poland want to know about your thoughts on AI and the role of AI in recording and especially in transcription. And maybe, Stig, we can start with you and maybe from Davidhorn's perspective. Where do you see AI fitting into all of this?
I think AI will contribute a lot within investigations. But for us, it's always been important to talk about human in the loop. So in our solution, if you want to make a automated transcript, the AA transcript, we call it a first draft. So this is nothing that should be taken for granted as a verbatim transcript. You need to verify it and you need to kind of confirm that it is correct. But AI will for sure reduce time you spend on it. So there will be a lot of time to actually do better investigation around the document. And it will help in all other terms of the investigation as well. But for speech to text and transcription, definitely a great thing as long as you have a human in the loop.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dan.
Can I add to that? So always interesting when we talk about AI, and it's really contemporary, as you said. So I think because I reflect to the situation in Indonesia, we have really, very diverse languages, very multilingual societies. And when we talk about AI, then particular language has been accommodated by AI, but other languages is AI cannot understood. So I think that's also a thing that we need to consider. So when we use produce transcripts by using the AI, there are a possibility of the use of non-standard language use, and the question is whether AI has that database. Yeah, unfamiliar accents, like the overlapping speech, how AI handle that. also like the variation in voice, like due to trauma or fear. Yeah, so I think how accurate then AI can also touch on that. And also in terms of the meaning, on the pragmatic meaning, some AI are trained quite well in handling like the canonical forms of what is the pragmatic meaning, but sometimes people, you know, when they uh, convey their message, they use the non-canonical forms, and I think I still have to learn more on that. Yeah, thanks.
Without a doubt. Ivar, any thoughts on AI?
Yeah, I definitely have a lot of ideas around AI. And of course, as Chris says, we have to be really careful about kind of just jumping on this train without thinking. But, and I have to say but, because I think there is probably a lot more bias and problems with the recordings practices we have today. First of all, no recording. Secondly, how do we know that the recordings are properly transcribed and actually present? From time to time, I act as a expert witness in Norwegian courts. When I then go in and double check recordings, they are never, and I say never, reliable, and also on critical themes. And I was just lucky enough this morning and yesterday evening to read the draft of Adrian Gates' PhD thesis, where he has looked into the quality of transcripts from the Irish police. I won't go too deep in it because it will be published very soon, but it shows exactly the same. There is a lot of inconsistencies and omissions. So I think we have to leave behind the idea that the situation today is good. We have to understand that we actually need the help that recording and AI used in a good way can help us. And it's, of course, like Stig said, first of all, maybe the speeding up business processes that AI can provide will probably also make people be more willing to invest in recording. Because this can actually be not only a time saver, but it can probably also help you to. I wrote an article years back saying that if the police knew what the police knows, we would have solved a lot more cases. Because I think there is such a overload of information in every single interview, and not to talk about all the big cases. We probably need AI-driven tools to navigate more safely in that ocean of data and information.
Yeah, so the AI question is a nice setup to a broader concluding question, and I want to thank everybody for your questions and comments that you put in, and I apologize for time considerations. We haven't been able to get to all of them, but for each of our panelists, I would like you to ponder the future of recording interviews, anything you haven't said already that you want to make sure you get on the record, especially as it pertains to making these practices institutionalized within police practice. So, Steve, would you like to start us off on this?
Yeah, and we touched based on a lot of it, but I think it's important that, you know, there is a combination of leadership commitment. There needs to be a clear policy, proper training, and there needs to be infrastructure in place. But training and policies, the framework, it needs to be there. Otherwise, I mean, Eva mentioned all recording is better than no recording, and we normally say that, but in a case where you actually record, but you cannot verify that you maintain the integrity of, it's also, you know, dangerous. So if we can get the policy framework in place, the training programs, technical standards, and reliable infrastructure will be there.
Thank you, Steve. Dian, any final thoughts? You gave us so much. Thank you. Anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, Yeah, so I agree absolutely with Steve. There is a future of recording. Yeah, in the era of like the digitalization of justice, international cooperation of pressure will play a role, yeah, in relation to legal reform, especially in our country. Another point I would like to add is on the point related to like international cooperation and shared learning are also important. The issue I think is more than legal, more than technology. It's also about changing the general behavior and norms of police culture. That's the point that Ivar addressed since the beginning, right? And many countries have already gone through this transition, I believe, moving from written reports to mandatory audio or video recording. And so learning from their experiences and aligning with best practices, I think can really help for countries like Indonesia to move forward.
Thank you, Dian. Ivar, last thoughts.
Yeah, I think this, I'm also consulting Davidhorn in their development on these issues. And what we are probably going to try to experiment a bit more with in the future, at least on the back room, is to have individual microphones. They have to be purpose built so that they don't pick up too much scratches and it's too. But if you had that, you probably could be easier also to pick up who is saying what. And also people speaking in, sometimes to speak over each other and picking up that. So that's also an essential thing. If we want to go on further, it should be no doubt who's speaking now. And so that could also be something that we should look at.
Okay, well, I want to thank everyone, Stig, Dian, Ivar, again for sharing your expertise with us. I'd like to thank Davidhorn for being our long-term partner. Thanks to Brian Campbell, who's behind the scenes doing the magic to make this work. Especially thank you, Bri. And of course, my partner here, Susanna Flolo, couldn't do this without you. Thank you to everybody who came, and we wish you a lovely remainder to your 2025, and we will see you back here for IIRG Conversation sometime in February 2026. Bye all. Thank you.